I'm Nana for Tilburg for BizNews, and I'm happy to have back at BizNews Richard Quest. He's, of course, CNN's foremost international business correspondent and host of Quest Means Business and also Quest's World of Wonders. Richard, you're back in South Africa. Why?
Well, I'm delighted to be back. It's the first thing. I was here just a couple of months ago when I was over in Cape Town. I'm very pleased to be back here for the simple reason that I was over at the Indaba, at the Tourism Indaba over in Durban. And then I had other meetings here in Johannesburg. And I was out at Sun City last night talking to some financial experts. So it's given me more of an understanding of what's happening, both in the real economy here, in the economic situation, and I think crucially tourism, which is such an important part of the South African economy.
Well, you've been to Cape Town and you were very impressed by Cape Town, although load shedding, you call it a cutesy words that we use for power cuts, very apt there. And you've seen the difference there is between Cape Town and Durban or eThekwini and now Johannesburg. So what are your observations about this bifurcation that's going on in the country?
Cape Town starts to take advantage of the natural beauty of the place and the mountain. So, you're ahead of the game to a certain extent. But I was very impressed by Durban. I was impressed by the amount of money that has been spent on the seafront. I was staying on the seafront and I took a walk in the morning and it was delightful. People running, people enjoying themselves, you're making the best of what there is there. Clearly there needs to be and there should be more investment in terms of facilities, in terms of raising the infrastructure. But it comes from a fairly low base on the Eastern Cape. And there needs to be more money to be spent, I suspect, in the future. Joburg is just Joburg. I revel when I come here. I just love being in Johannesburg. I find it to have a vibe, energy. The reality is that Joburg sets the trends in so many ways.
Oh, well, Cape Town would love to take that title. So why do you love Joburg so much? When you talk about vibing, you clearly go away from Sandton?
Yes, I think the reason I say it's got the vibe, because, Cape Town, one has to be so careful here, because whatever I say, the Kenyans will be frothing at the mouth, the Joburgers will be absolutely seething. I think the duopoly of the two is a very elegant way forward. I think that you have the best of both. Cape Town is clearly the pretty boy in a sense. It looks gorgeous. It's got the beautiful scenery, the mountain and all of that. And then you come to Johannesburg, which is earthier. And it has a real, maybe arguably a more Africa feel about it in a sense. And that's before we've even been to other parts of the country. I was very lucky this morning. I got a nice good 2.5, 3 hour drive. I was out at Sun City. So I drove from here to Sun City and I've had a chance to, again, just talk to people, hear what's on their minds, see what they're worried about, find out what they think.
And we're used to that, but I would love to hear your perspectives from somebody looking in from the outside. What are the people telling you?
They're worried. People are worried. And people of all economic structures, all economic levels, they're worried. They're worried that the economy is performing. Somebody said to me, well, the economy is growing at 1.5 to 1%. So at least we're growing. But the point, Linda, is you should be growing at 5 or 6%. As a developing economy coming out of the pandemic, you should be enjoying that faster level of growth. But you're not, because 900 million rand a day is being spent because of load shedding, power cuts. You have a variety of problems that have to follow on from that. Money that should be invested elsewhere in the economy is not. And people are naturally worried. Your inflation, employment, these are deep-seated problems.
Well, if we could talk about tourism. You've been at a tourism conference. You've had sessions that you chaired. South Africa hasn't bounced back after the pandemic, you know of the natural beauty that the country had. It has everything to go for it when it comes to tourism. And the tourism numbers used to be far better. South Africa has not bounced back. Is that a global trend, or is it specific to South Africa, do you think?
No, it's not specific to South Africa. There are many other places that haven't fully bounced back. But South Africa has a couple of unique problems. Airlift, the famous issue of airlift. How do you get people here? Where are they coming from? Now, you and I like to often talk about the high-spending European or American tourists, but so much of tourism during pandemic was domestic tourism within South Africa. And then you have intra-regional tourism. Well, that hasn't bounced back because there isn't the air links yet. It hasn't fully been established. The truth, Linda, is the God's honest truth, is that until this continent gets to grips with its air links issue, that at very best, tourism across the continent, Pan-African, is going to be hobbled with one hand behind its back, a patch on one eye, and a shot in the foot. You've got to ask yourself, why in Europe has an entire industry of low-cost carriers grown up? Same in the United States, Frontier, Spirit, JetBlue. Same in Australia. Same even in Central and Southern America, where you now have more and more low-cost carriers flying between countries. But you don't have that in Africa because there's too many countries that are being too protectionist about opening up the air skies. Now, Linda, I promise you, I'll get off my hobby horse in a minute. Linda,
you're the expert on that in that field.
Agreement signed in 1998, I think it was, called the Yamoussoukro Declaration. Frankly, the only thing it's declared has been a waste of time. But there's supposed to be open sky. So until an airline from South Africa can fly to Kenya, from a Kenyan airline can until everybody can fly anywhere, you're not going to get the full benefits. It's as simple as that.
So was the problem too much regulation? They're trying to protect their own space, and meanwhile they're actually preventing people from coming in.
Do you know something? The number of times I've heard people talk about Africa rising, imagining Africa, all these phrases deflate. There is the money out there to invest if there is the opportunity and the right regulatory framework.
So the framework needs to come from the governments.
I think South Africa's done a lot better than others. A lot better than others. But if you look at your neighbours, how many of these countries are either still trying to start national airlines or they're trying to protect domestic markets? I mean, it's a nonsense. It's an absolute nonsense. I to some extent, I even raise an eyebrow with the new revamped, resurged SAA. I mean, it's just announced more aircraft for regional routes and the one long-haul flight or one long-haul aircraft. You've got to ask the question, what purpose is this airline going to serve? Once it is up and running, it's going to be tiny in comparison to its competitors, or once it's internationally. And I think that what I would like to hear from SAA is more of a strategy of where it sees itself in the global structure. How is it going to feed the people into South Africa? It has a role to play, but what is that role?
Well, so a lot of money was used to try to resurrect South Africa. Was that a mistake? Pouring all that money for what we call here a state-owned enterprise into SAA, and as you said, it doesn't even have the international presence that you expect of a South African airline.
So, first thing you have to divorce here in the discussion is the question of government assistance and SAA. Every airline pretty much in the world, with some exceptions, got government assistance during the pandemic. Every single one of them. Lufthansa got it. All the big US carriers got it. And they got it in the billions. Well, I've got news for you, Linda. All those airlines have paid back that money with interest. They have all paid back their loans and their guarantees with interest. Now, let's turn to South Africa. You have to ask, what role will SAA play? The country didn't have it for 18 months or however long. It's now back doing national routes, and it's going to go into regional routes, and that might be a proper role for it, and it'll have some cherry picking of London or Mauritius or 2 or 3 long haul routes. But the airline has to come up with a strategy for its long-term future. For instance, is it going to be like Qantas, which funnels so many of its passengers up to Dubai, and Emirates takes them to 1,000,001 places in Europe? Is that the vision? Is it going to be? These are things that it's playing around with, but until it does, it's going to, the South African taxpayer has to ask, how much longer do we want to support an airline that arguably has limited economic viability in an open skies environment?
So in the ideal world, what should African governments do to improve these airlines that you were talking about?
Oh, it's simple. Deregulate and open up. Simple. I mean, this is not rocket science. You could do several things. You could just open up. You could say to Ethiopian, do you want to fly from Kenya to South Africa? And you could say to other airlines, you could say to an SAA, would you like to fly from Ethiopia to Nigeria? And if you can't get anybody to do that, you say to an Emirates or a Qatar, would you like to fly within Africa? It's called the 7th freedom of the air. Would you like to fly within Africa so that you don't have to touch Dubai, or you can fly within the continent? If you unleash that potential, you will be so much better off.
And that would improve tourism, the tourism that we desperately need.
Look, tourism, your tourism product is brilliant in South Africa. Your tourism product does not need, it needs marketing, yes. And I think the new minister, she's a breath of fresh air. The new minister is a breath of fresh air. And I heard her at Indaba, and I heard her say, we've got enough plans. It's time for solutions and to execute and implement. And that's really the nub of this policy now. No more plans, no more discussions. Actually get on and do it. Now, she's done some very controversial things, disbanding the board, interim board chair, interim CEO, all of which she will have to justify in the fullness of time by success. But Patricia de Lille is not a woman that you take lightly, and her record speaks for itself. So I think it's a brave person that would vote against her or would bet against her. Now she's got tourism.
Yeah, and ideas like Tottenham Hotspur, did you see that? What happened there?
When you look at the Tottenham Hotspur idea, did it have merit? That's the first thing. Let's ignore the way it was done and how much it cost. Did the actual idea have merit? Lots of places used sponsorship on T-shirts. There was lots of other things that went with that sponsorship. It was expensive. It always is for that sort of thing. But did the idea have merit? And that, I think, I'm not qualified to answer because I'm not a sponsorship expert. But I think that the criticism of it has more to do with the way it was done than necessarily what was being done.
Well, Richard, I have to ask a last very provocative question. You were broadcasting the coronation of King Charles III, and his sceptre and Queen Camilla's crown had South African diamonds, the Cullinan diamond in them. And some people will say it's time for them to be given back. So would you like to comment on that?
I'm certainly not going to jump into the question of, return of property. Cullinan diamonds, which I think we can all agree, wherever they came from and whoever owns them, they were spectacular. And you'll be aware, of course, that His Majesty King Charles has made great strides, certainly looking at the slavery past, the role of the monarchy, the issue of the Elgin marbles, for instance. But here's a question, Linda. Here's a question for you. Once you start down this road of returning, where do you stop? At what point do you say, no, your claim's not valid? Or your claim may be valid, but it's not the right thing to do. Or, no, we're not going to do that because history has moved on. Now, I can hear people frothing at the mouth at this. So even then you've got the Elgin marbles, and then you've got the Cullinan diamonds. Oh, you tell me, Linda, what is the sell-by date and the date of which you say, do you know something? This stays where it is. I think, I'm not saying whether the Cullinans should or should not. What I am saying is you have to think about that, because who knows, Linda, one day somebody will be knocking on your door saying, excuse me, that's mine, hand it over.
That is a lot of thought-provoking stuff you said there, and I'm sure a lot of people would love to comment on that. Richard Quest, so fantastic speaking to you. I could have asked you about crime in South Africa and everything, but you clearly a lover of South Africa, and we'd love to have you back. Thanks so much for speaking to us.
Well, hang on. Don't forget, you've got the Pat and Richard show next year, because ahead of next year's Indaba, assuming I'm invited, the minister, and assuming the minister's still there, we're going on a road trip before Indaba. We will be arguing who will be driving. I have no doubt she will steal the wheel and she'll wrestle the wheel from me. We're going to go and see some great things in Africa. It'll be the Pat and Richard show, or the Pat and Dick show next year.
Wow, that sounds like something we should watch, and definitely. So are you going to talk about these things on CNN, or is this... Okay.
And I think one of the things about South Africa, one of the reasons is also the time when the Quest Means Business is shown here. It's 9 o'clock at night. So we are part of your evening entertainment in that sense. It's not like Asia where it might be 4 o'clock in the morning. So it's very... So I take, some of my producers would say, an unhealthy interest, but I take a very strong interest in all African stories, because the opportunities here are like nowhere else. The challenges and the problems are also like nowhere else. And I think that the moment you get real on both, then it's amazing. By the way, can I just show you? I'm at the
I saw that Mandela behind you.
I'm in the Sanctuary Mandela, and I'm in the office where he used to have all the meetings after he was freed and before he became president, all the constitutional stuff, and where he wrote all those letters. So I feel the weight of history and my insignificance to being up to the task of being in this room.
Well, may he spread some, we used to call it Madiba magic on you.
Oh, yes, please. Spread away.
Richard Quest, lovely speaking to you.
Thank you.